It is Wednesday afternoon, September 4th, 2019. Another update coming your way for Hurricane Dorian and company. There are two other named systems out there in the Atlantic Basin now. Really gives you an indication we're less than a week out from the peak of hurricane season. Watches and warnings stretch from the central Florida East Coast all the way up to the border of Maryland in the mid-Atlantic. Hurricane warnings, tropical storm warnings, and watches the farther north, all, of course, associated with Dorian. Through southeastern Virginia, northeastern North Carolina, the watches, the hurricane watches, have now been upgraded to hurricane warnings. That means hurricane-like conditions. Winds of over 74 miles per hour are imminent within the next 36 hours. Watches to the north of there, tropical storm watches here that'll likely be upgraded by this evening. Here's how the storm looks so far. Really, in the last couple of hours, it's starting to show some signs of at least some moderate strengthening. Why? We're looking at the infrared imagery here. This tells us the temperature of the cloud tops. When we're starting to see more of that black shade, some white shading in there, colder cloud tops, meaning healthier thunderstorm activity, completely wrapping around that center. Now, it is moving over some very warm waters. The Gulf Stream water temperatures here are in the upper 80s, almost bath water, and it's expected to track along that in the next couple of days, providing plenty of fuel for the system and at least maintain Category 2 strength. That's the latest upgrade from the Hurricane Center as of 2 o'clock. 105 mile per hour winds, still with gusts higher than that at 125. It is moving a little bit quicker off to the north-northwest at around 9 miles per hour. That track north-northwest takes it just off the coast of South Carolina and Savannah, Georgia as we get on into early tomorrow morning, straddles the geography of the southeast coastline, and then takes a pass to what looks to be right over Cape Lookout and eventually Cape Hatteras as we get into very early Friday morning, still at that point as a Category 2 storm with 100 mile per hour winds. Keep in mind, as it gains latitude, moves north, the wind field will continue to expand, and we've already seen that happening here over the last couple of hours, or last 12 to 24 hours, really, that wind field expanding. Here's a couple wind observations from the east coast of Florida all the way up to Savannah, Georgia. Seeing some winds up and over tropical storm force. In fact, Jacksonville had a gust of around 55, and they were sustained with some tropical storm force winds there. There's the radar loop. You can see the eye is still much intact with the heavy outer eye wall bands here indicating the strongest of the winds. Most of that staying offshore, thankfully, but of course all of this is coming onshore, causing some storm surge issues. So let's break down the threats as we go forward here with Dorian. We have 5 main threats we're going to go through here one by one. First will be wind, tropical storm or hurricane force winds, sustained and gusts as we go forward and it tracks along the southeast coastline. Storm surge issues from where it is now off the coast of Florida all the way up to off the coast of Virginia. We're going to see as much as 8-foot storm surge in locations like Charleston, South Carolina looks to see the brunt of this. Then on top of that, tropical downpours, tropical rains. Freshwater flooding will be an issue of itself. 10 inches or more of rainfall possible in some locations, especially along the immediate coast. You factor into that astronomically higher tides, tidal flooding at points of high tide as we get into Friday afternoon, particularly here locally, and the wave action will lead to some coastal erosion. That wind field from Dorian has continued to expand. Now hurricane force winds extend out 70 miles from the center. Tropical storm force winds come out about 175 miles from the center of the storm there. That's 39 to 73 mile per hour winds. As we go farther out in time here, you'll notice that this yellow donut kind of expands in size as we gain latitude, bringing hurricane force winds in the red here to places like Wilmington, pass through Charleston, and right over the Outer Banks of North Carolina, stretching up through Dare County, parts of northeastern North Carolina, and of course the tropical storm force winds here extending all the way out into southeastern Virginia with some higher gusts there, not exiting the region until we get to Friday evening. Let's get a little bit closer in locally here about some of those wind gusts that we could potentially be seeing here. This is off of the European model, some gust potential as we go out in time. We'll start off Thursday afternoon, go right into Thursday evening. Here we are at 11 o'clock, starting to see the winds pick up, especially farther to the south, near Cape Hatteras, where the storm is projected to move pretty much right over. By 2 a.m. Friday, Hatteras seeing a wind gust of over 50 miles per hour, and it only gets stronger, nearly 70 miles per hour by 5 a.m. Friday. Starting to see the winds everywhere else north of there starting to increase as well. And then look at these numbers. Hatteras seeing a 100 mile per hour wind gust potentially as the center of Dorian is pretty much right on top of the area there, bringing onshore winds and some storm surge values approaching 3 to 5 feet potentially. Hampton seeing those gusts up to 43 miles per hour, and Matthews nearly a 40 mile per hour gust potentially by Friday morning. We go to 10 o'clock in the afternoon, or in the morning hours, late morning, early afternoon on Friday. Still seeing those winds extend northwards. Edenton, Elizabeth City up and over 70 miles per hour. Hampton at 50, Norfolk 55, Virginia Beach 57 miles per hour potentially. And right through Friday afternoon, the winds stay up. They do change direction though, and that brings up sound side flooding down through the Outer Banks. Still seeing those gusts by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, up and over 55 miles per hour out through Virginia Beach and Hatteras. And then finally, as it pulls away, the winds start to calm down. Let's put a few more numbers on here on the map that makes it a little easier to find a location that you're closest to give you an indication of what you'd be looking at. We're looking at the European model once again. The numbers you're seeing here are in miles per hour and the potential wind gust values here. Here we are at 3:30 in the morning on Friday. It's getting breezy out there, onshore winds. By 9:30 in the morning, potentially seeing 50 mile per hour winds, Elizabeth City, Virginia Beach, down to Edenton, over 60 through KDH. Kill Devil Hills, if you saw that go through there, was up and over 75 miles per hour. As the storm center, you see it located pretty much due east and offshore, changing those winds coming in out of the northwest, and then things start to calm down. By late in the afternoon Friday into Friday evening, it's still even breezy as we get into the day on Saturday. Now what's up next? Storm surge. First, we need to understand what drives storm surge. Onshore winds piling up the waters of the ocean along low-lying areas. Those winds are sustained, so it's continuously pushing that water over the low-lying areas, adding up, and we lead to some storm surge inundation. Some of the numbers we could be seeing from central east coast of Florida all the way up through Virginia Beach and parts of the eastern shore could approach several feet in terms of that storm surge inundation. Around 2 to 4 here, move a little farther north through Jacksonville, Savannah, Georgia, 3 to 5 foot storm surge. Charleston, 4 to 7 feet just north of there as you get closer to Wilmington. Myrtle Beach area, 5 to 8 feet potentially in terms of that storm surge. 4 to 7 as you move through Wilmington, down through much of the Outer Banks. Cape Hatteras, look out. Looking at 4 to 6 foot storm surge, and farther to the north here, all the way up into the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay, 2 to 4 foot storm surge is potentially possible as we get through Dorian, moving along the Outer Banks later on Thursday night into Friday. Freshwater flooding, rain coming from the clouds. We're looking at several inches here, a band of very heavy numbers here as we throw some numbers on there for you. 5 to 8 inches, locally higher, but it is a steep cutoff. The farther north and west you go, there'll be a sharp gradient here. Look at Richmond, possibly only seeing 1/4 of an inch. What does the European model show? Again, the heaviest rain from Charleston along the coast all the way up to Norfolk and through the Outer Banks. Some numbers on there, very similar. Keeping the heaviest of it, the closer you are to that central track of Dorian with that sharp gradient or cutoff to the north and west. So tides are going to be an issue too. The high tide cycle Friday afternoon, right around 4 p.m. at Sewell's Point, up to major flooding there, 6.6 feet potentially. And to compare it with some of the other tides that we've seen from other storms, Hurricane Irene in 2011 brought a tide at Sewell's Point, 7.56. Isabel in 2003, nearly 8 foot. And then Hermine back in 2016, almost around this same time, was around 6.2 foot as the highest tide. So we're right up there as we get into Friday afternoon and evening's high tide cycle. So let's time it out now for you and break down the threats even more locally. So here we are, inland Hampton Roads, late Thursday through Friday, that timing. The winds start out of the northeast coming onshore, then they turn out of the northwest as the storm exits and moves off to the northeast. 20 to 30 miles per hour, gusts up to 50, 1 to 3 inches again, higher the farther south and east you are, less farther north and west. Tidal flooding, moderate, and the overall impact moderate there. As we move to areas along coastal Hampton Roads, same timing there, winds 40 to 50, gusts up to 60. Rainfall will be higher the closer you are to the coast, 4 to 6 inches, major tidal flooding, and a moderate to high impact there. As we move into interior parts of northeastern North Carolina, 30 to 50 mile per hour winds, those gusts getting just under hurricane force at 70 miles per hour. Slightly higher rain totals, 3 to 6 inches, moderate to major tidal flooding, and that overall impact moderate to high. Now the Outer Banks will start on the northern side of things there. Winds of 40 to 60, gusts up to 80. 4 to 8 inches with locally higher amounts, major tidal flooding, and a high impact event for you there. Farther south, where the projected center of Dorian is supposed to track over Cape Hatteras, we're looking at 50 to 70 mile per hour winds, gusts to 90 miles per hour, 5 to 10 inches of rain, locally higher. Tidal flooding will be major, and this will be a very significant impact for that entire area. I mentioned this was an update about Dorian and company because we have Fernand in the western parts of the Gulf of Mexico about to make landfall in northern parts of Mexico. Not an issue there. And then we have Gabrielle, another tropical system now tracking out to the north and west, staying in the Atlantic. But two other areas here to watch, one that will likely become another named system, and then this one we really have to keep an eye on as we get in the next 7 to 10 days as it tracks a little lower latitude and farther to the west. That's all we got for today. You can find me on social media, on Facebook or on Twitter. We'll have a Facebook Live and a YouTube Live coming up in just a little while. Evan will join me and we'll talk more about what to expect locally here in Hampton Roads.